What was the most difficult thing about researching this whole event, this whole book, this whole situation?
Well, it was fraught with difficulties because so many people have so much to lose.
Yeah.
So even if they wanted certain information in my book, they had to weigh up whether in fact it would be of benefit or potentially harmful. So it was a difficult investigation to undergo. It was not easy.
And I'm assuming it must have been quite frustrating at a certain point where you couldn't get perhaps the answers that you wanted or you needed there, for a whole variety of reasons. That must have been quite frustrating along the way, because obviously I would assume...
Well, no, I wouldn't say I didn't get the answers. It just took a long time to get the answers.
Yeah.
So
yeah, of course.
I believe I had got the answers. And I believe I got the answers from the people who know.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that with all the research and all the things that you include in the book, it's a lot clearer what happened before I read the book and what, and after. And I know I saw someone say yesterday, or it might have been the day before on Twitter, that it was a book full of conspiracy theories because they'd seen like a little thing, I think it was in the Sun, which basically was saying about the pilot having being a trained parachuter. And this person was kind of saying, it's a book for just a conspiracy theory book. And actually the mention of the pilot having being an expert parachuter is literally like maybe a paragraph at the most. And at no point do you say, the pilot parachuted out of the plane and, he did this, and this. It was merely stating fact in a small part towards the end of the book. And I think people have got the wrong idea about the book because of comments like that.
Yeah, I think there's far more interesting conspiracy theories than that particular one. However, it's part of the whole because it makes you think. It makes you think. It gives you questions in your mind, doesn't it?
Yes.
He was pretty pathetic at everything else, but he was expert at this. So, did he jump? Or did he have a parachute? Was it all pre-planned? It just leads to a lot of questions that I didn't need to actually ask them in the book because they're obvious questions, aren't they? And the reader, if you read it, you're drawing your own conclusions, and people have drawn their own conclusions when they've read some headlines that appeared all over the shop, because people have asked me, you make the point that he was an expert skydiver. Why did you make the point? What were you trying to say? I said, well, it's pretty obvious. No one knows the answer, but what we do know, although I said he's an expert skydiver, we do know these facts. We do not know where he is. No one has found the body. No one has found any evidence of anything other than what his record shows, and that he was an expert skydiver, he was colourblind, he was a part-time plumber, a part-time DJ, he didn't hold a commercial licence, yet he was doing a commercial flight. He had 4 court orders against him where he was heavily in debt. Put all that together, what is your conclusion?
Yeah, and everything which you just stated is facts. It's not speculation on your part. You're not wildly kind of speculating, or maybe he was an expert skydiver, and maybe he's done this and maybe he's done that. It's literally facts. He was in debt. He is an expert skydiver. He was colorblind. He was a part-time plumber.
Where is he?
Yeah, well, this is it. So I'm going to jump ahead actually to some questions which we got sent in specifically about that aspect of it. Johnny asks, I do apologize because I've just moved off the question. Johnny asks, does Harry really think that there's a chance the pilot could have survived, and why?
Well, my answer to that is, if you're personally asking me, is no. I don't think that's the case. But I'm trying to factually, as you rightly pointed out, when it comes to the conspiracy theories, there are no facts. They are conspiracy theories. So
Yes.
I'm just trying to report what people are talking about. And clearly, you're drawing conclusions that I must be talking to people close to this investigation. And that's correct. But there are loads of people close to this investigation, and I'm not prepared, obviously, to discuss the sources, but there are multiple sources. So I'm talking to a lot of people. And they are speculating all sorts of things. You can see in the conspiracy theories, and it's not my word, someone's mentioned the word murder.
Yeah.
Again, let me emphasize, not my word. Now, if you say to me, was he murdered? I would say, well, I would not have thought so. But, it's not a closed case. If the police are investigating criminal manslaughter, does that not amount to murder? I don't know. It's a moot point. People who've read the book, and we've given some quotes from people who have read it, said it's almost like stranger than fiction. You could make a film of it, but no one would believe the film script.
Yeah, no one. It's almost like everyone would think it was fiction, even though it's factual. Johnny also asked a follow-up to that, which we've kind of covered just then, but he said, what reason could the pilot have had for parachuting out of the plane and then not coming forward? But I mean, like you say, you can kind of draw your own conclusions on that. I think Johnny likes our conspiracy theories series, but what I would say is, there is so many unanswered questions in terms of the pilot and, how did the player get so much carbon monoxide in his system that it's only natural. And also, in terms of a police investigation, they should be asking these questions. Is there? So I'm not saying that I think that the pilot's parachuted out of the plane and he's still alive or anything like that. But what I'm saying is the police should investigate whether that's possible that could have happened. The police
Well,
should.
it's a little known fact that Ben Rumsby at the Telegraph told me actually yesterday, and I didn't know it. But he told me that the investigations by the aviation authorities take precedent over police investigations, and the police investigation has to wait until the aviation authorities concludes its findings. And we've discussed endlessly, can they possibly be 100% sure how that gas got into the cockpit when they don't have the plane?
No, I mean...
So if we look at all the evidence, and this is what I've tried to follow the evidence, which is what I was trained to do 40 years ago. Follow the facts, follow the evidence. There is none left. The plane was broken up, presumably by natural sources. I would assume that's be correct. Again, there's no evidence that is 100% correct. Could it have been disturbed by a third party? Well, it could have been. I've no evidence to suggest that it had been. But there is some evidence that is still there that none of us have seen, and that's the evidence that Henderson can give us.
Indeed. Do you think, well, this is a question from someone, they say, do you think anyone will ever be charged with anything related to the crash other than potentially David Henderson?
Well, I don't know about you, but I enjoy watching, Death in Paradise, Poirot, Midsummer Murders.
Yeah.
I really enjoy those things. You see all they're written by professional writers, but crime writers. And it's interesting, this book has been pitched as one of the best-selling in crime on some of the listings. It tells you all you need to know. But you watch all these programs and you see, do not disturb the crime scene. You know, the evidence might be there. And here we have a situation where we didn't actually get to the crime scene. I mean, it's begging belief, really. So I'm afraid that I've got as far as I can, but there is still more to come, because I'll be fascinated to see what conclusions the aviation authorities draw without actually having the plane to investigate. I'll be interested eventually, if ever, hopefully, we hear what Henderson has got to say in some shape or form, and that will only happen if there is a charge and a court hearing. I have my doubts whether that will ever happen, but you never know. And if it does proceed, he, in my view, won't be the only person charged with manslaughter.
Yeah.
There is one other possibility that you haven't yet touched upon, is that the club hired 2.5 months ago the leading lawyer in France to pursue a potential criminal manslaughter charge against Nantes. And there's a reason why that's in France and not in England, because one specific area of French law is far, far stronger and more potent in France than it is here. Now, I believe passionately that if we want to know the real truth about what happened, pursuing this court case would lead us closer than anything else to that conclusion. And I think it's in the domain and in the power of the football club's owner, Vincent Tan, to decide whether to pursue that case, because my information is that the legal brains in France who have been investigating it believe there is a case to answer. And that might be the sole area where we could actually find the truth of this matter.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know how you're fixed for time, but obviously we haven't touched upon the kind of the aftermath in terms of the almost the war between the two football clubs, with Nantes chasing the money and Cardiff not wanting to pay until the investigations have finished. Would you have time to quickly kind of go over that, or do you need to sort of look towards?
There's a war. I just think it's very simple. You know, there is a very grey area about who the player belonged to.
Yes.
Because when he stepped on that fateful flight, his contract registered with the Premier League had been returned as null and void. The story that we broke on the Telegraph, and the culpability and all those issues that we broke on the Telegraph going back many, many months. It's perfectly clear that Nantes believed that he was registered through the Welsh FA, he was registered through FIFA, he had his international clearance. We all saw the player photographed at Cardiff, with Cardiff putting on their website that he was a Cardiff player. But the contract was returned. It was illegal in terms of the manner in which the signing on fee was being paid to the player, with it all being paid up front. It was outside of the Premier League rules. So it had to be renegotiated, which really is like any purchase you or I might make. If it becomes null and void, you've got time to think about it. You may decide you don't want it after all.
Yeah. And he could have signed for another club at that point as well. It's important to state that when that contract was returned, he could have then negotiated a move to a different football club. So
here's your conspiracy theories, which is being discussed openly behind closed doors.
Okay.
Is a lot of people had a lot to lose when he was stepping onto that flight.
Yeah, they certainly did.
And how did the poisonous gas get into the cockpit?
Yeah, that's the one for me, because
when you consider so many people had so much to lose, if, for example, he changed his mind or could not renegotiate that contract. I'm sure he could. Everyone I talked to suggested it was a formality. It was just going back to the drawing board and reshaping it. Possibly, maybe that's what they want you to know. So there you have it. This is what people are talking about.
Indeed. So just before we finish off with the rest of the questions which people have sent in, I just wanted to go back to something you said a few minutes ago. You mentioned about when we were talking about the parachuting and the skydiving, and you said it was a conspiracy theory, and you said that you personally did not believe it. Now, if I've read on social media for the last few days from various places that that's what you do believe, and that's what this book is. Now, that just goes to show how people jump to conclusions because they've seen that report in the Sun or wherever, and they've assumed that in this book that's the narrative that you're pushing, whereas you're actually not pushing any narrative.
No, well, you read the book and you made the point in one paragraph.
Yeah, absolutely.
And nothing after that. Nothing from it. Then I said, well, this is what must have happened. I didn't draw that conclusion at all. And you're asking me a personal view, and I'm giving it to you. But absolutely. I've no evidence that my personal view is right. I've no evidence that it's wrong. There is no evidence. But, the circumstantial evidence suggests otherwise.
Yeah, and the one thing I would say actually in your book is you don't actually give your personal opinion of what you think happened. What you do is you give the facts around the research that you found while investigating the situation. And that's what I think people who haven't read the book lose sight of, because they haven't read it. They assume that it's going in one direction, when in actual fact, it's the opposite. So Andy Campbell, who we do the football podcast with, and I'll also be doing a show about the book with Andy next week. He's in the middle of reading it. We're going to discuss it and discuss this interview as well and see. But he sent me a couple of questions for you, which he wanted to know. So he said, why choose that title?
Well, I haven't spoken to you for this length of time. I'm not sure how long it is. I think it's appropriate. It's up to you to decide whether you do, but you need to read the book as you've done to decide. So I would put that to you. Do you think it's an appropriate title?
It's a difficult one because I think I would.
Well, let's look at it logically. There was foul play, wasn't there? Would you come to that conclusion?
Yes, there was. Yeah, absolutely.
Foul play. What kind of foul play? Who was responsible for the foul play? What degree of foul play? But there was foul play. This was not an accident.
No, there's at the end of the day, there's people who are responsible, whether directly or indirectly, and there's also people who are not being fully open and honest about what they know.
Yes, so I think we have to come to this conclusion.
Which makes it
was not an accident. There was foul play. Was it manslaughter or was it murder? It's a question. I'm not giving you the answer to that because I don't know.
Yeah, of course. That's the problem. That's the thing is none of us really know, and until Mr. Henderson decides to share what he knows, or really that's or if this French court case goes ahead, maybe we'll find out some more details. And he also asks, why did you choose to release the book now?
Well, it was somebody connected to the investigation who reminded me that it was a year on the 21st since it happened, and they suggested that should be the date to release the book. Mm-hmm. And I think everyone came to the conclusion, although it was a contentious and very controversial decision, why not? I mean, the point being is here we are on Tuesday, 1 year on, and we still have no answers to some key questions. Clearly we broke the story originally many months ago that there might be legal action for negligence. I think we can assume now that negligence is the least of the evils that took place here. How far we can go beyond negligence into criminal manslaughter, murder, I don't know. I don't have any evidence to support that. I can only say, do the police have any evidence? They have been investigating, and they made one arrest and released Henderson, and are presumably going to make more inquiries once the aviation authorities have reached their conclusion. One can only assume. But, I don't have the evidence to personally draw any conclusions. I can only ask the question myself. And I hope once you've read the book, people will be asking those questions as well.
Indeed. What would you say to people who say that it's disrespectful to release a book titled The Killing of Emiliano Sala on the 1-year anniversary of his death?
Well, the conclusion I would draw is he was killed. How and to what degree we've just discussed.
Yeah.
To do it 1 year on is pertinent. It makes people alert and aware and asking these questions again. And I think that's the object of investigative journalism. It's the object of the media, to provoke people into answering questions they don't want to answer. How many books on crime have been written where the subjects, have been ill-fated and their families have suffered? I mean, are you not allowed to write any crime books at all? I mean, that's just a nonsense answer. I mean, it's a nonsense argument. It just really beggars belief that anyone could even answer that question. Professional journalists like myself have written 85 books. This isn't my first book on corruption in football.
Yeah.
Or not quite. I've got to say, of all the 85 books I've written, and we've talked about George Best, Pele, Glenn Hoddle, Ruud Gullit, I'm probably proudest of this book than any book I've ever written, because it's provocative to get people to try and answer the questions that need to be answered.
Fair enough. I think, and I would agree as well, because I do feel like before I read this book, because it's been nearly a year, I was kind of very just accepting that it was, a plane crash, and we'll probably never know why the plane crashed because they haven't got the wreckage. And then all of a sudden now, having read the book, I've got a new impetus for wanting to find out exactly what went on and exactly why it happened. And it's certainly made me think. Andy also asks, do you think the book will have any impact on future criminal charges against anyone?
Well, I sincerely hope so. But if this is a personal opinion, it's no, because, I am very cynical. I'm sorry to be an old cynical journalist, but I'm very cynical about the motives for not wanting to unravel things that really would take a long time, would be a lot of manpower, a lot of expense to achieve what? What would you actually achieve?
Yeah.
Yes, we all want to know the facts. We all want to know what really happened. But there's so much that we just discussed now that makes it difficult to discover that. But my gut feeling is we may never unravel what has become, in my view, somewhat of a cover-up.
Yes, and I do feel that once you read the book and you read the research and things like that, it's difficult not to think that way. Nye Brownie on Twitter asked, could you ask him what he intends to do with the profits from the book?
Well, I was thinking of a world cruise and a house in Monte Carlo. Look, let me tell you, I've written 85 books and I haven't retired yet. So it tells you how much you can make on a book. But particularly a book like this, I have outlined that no publisher actually wanted it to start with, and had rejections on quite a few. Well, why did they do that? Besides the fact they probably thought it wasn't a very good book, I don't know. But they obviously, look at the commercial prospect of the book and didn't think there was much of it. The book is on sale at Amazon, as we can see. It's roughly £10. I think it's now reduced to £9. But let's just look at a book, any book, not this one, but a book that sells for £10. 50% of that would go to Amazon.
Yep.
Then you've got the publisher, the printers, you've got the editors. How much do you think is left from that £10? What does anyone think out there that you're talking about? And you've really got to sell a book in really big numbers. Unless a book sells 20, 30,000, 50,000 copies, which this book won't do, there's precious little profit.
So, and I think one of the reasons he was asking that is, will any of the kind of money from the book go to Emiliano Sala's family?
Well, look, the club, I've been in touch with Cardiff City, as you would expect. And one of the things that the chairman, who sees this very much as a crusade, because the club get a lot of stick about why they don't pay the transfer fee, but I don't think there's entitlement to have a proper hearing to find out the full facts before they pay out £15 million with no asset. It really is something that you've got to look at very, very carefully about the whole dynamics of paying, setting up a trust fund, giving money to the family. I'm sure the club would love to do that, but it would be misinterpreted if that happened. So I've made representations to the family, to the club, and the chairman has said in the book that one aspect of this is, while everyone's squabbling over the transfer fee, no one's looking at the family on their welfare and how they could be helped. The club are trying to, but it's difficult because, as I said, it could be misinterpreted. I've put up all sorts of ideas about a testimonial match, a dinner function where all the proceeds and linking it to the book goes directly to the family, where you could raise substantial funds. But, rather than worry about how much I'm going to make out of this book, which is negligible. In fact, it's probably costing me money, amount of time and effort I'm spending on it. If there was a movement by these fans to say, let's have a testimonial in the guy's name, why don't the two clubs eventually sort out their troubles and Cardiff and Nantes play a game, 2 games, one in Nantes, one at Cardiff, and all the funds go to the family.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, and I wish, I'm a Cardiff City fan, and passionately, when it first sort of broke that they weren't paying the transfer fee, I was a bit sort of, oh, they should pay it. That's a really bad look. But then the more I've looked into it, even before I'd read the book, but even more so now, all they've said is they will not pay it until they find out what happened. Once they find out what happened, they've said, they will pay whatever they are obligated to pay. And I think that's fair enough. Because,
well, do you think your club should pay the £15 million, then find out a few months down the line the fact that there was some foul play and he wasn't even their player to start with?
Yeah, and Nantes wouldn't give the money back in that situation, would they?
No, I think it would not be. We haven't even touched on Nantes.
No, we haven't. I'm a bit disappointed, to be honest. There's so much to talk about, and we didn't quite get there.
But the book talks about Nantes, and it talks about them. And I'm sure you've got an interesting perception of where the money might go if it was ever paid.
Yes, I have a few speculative ideas, shall we say. Look, I know we're pushing towards the end, so I do want to get these questions in because people sent them in and they've taken the time to send them, so I want to sort of make sure I get to ask you. Bluebird Past on Twitter said, can you ask him if at any point he thought maybe it wasn't a good idea to write this book due to the sensitivity of the issue, or was the thought of making a few quid from a tragic death too lucrative? Well, obviously, we just discussed the part about making a few quid. It's probably not going to be for the financial reasons. But did you ever think about not writing the book due to the kind of sensitivity of the issue?
No. As I said to you, the object is to provoke debate again about the subject. Because, when did you actually ever see an article about Emiliano Sala in the last 3 months? No one's interested. The media have lost interest. It's yesterday's news. No one's interested in all the things we've just talked about, unless the book was published. You would be talking to me now, and then no one would be talking about any of it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That's fair to say. That that's factually correct to say as well, because it has.
You've also pointed out to you that I couldn't find a publisher interested, and I pointed out why I was so reluctant to do it in the first place, because there'd been so much intimidation around this book and so much difficulty. There's people out there who do not want you to read this book, and I hope I've explained why.
Yeah, I think so. Libby F on Twitter also, she said, the only question I have is how long before it can be translated into Spanish so that she can send out copies to Argentina for the family to read?
Yeah, I mean, I've tried my best, but I despair sometimes about the failure for people to see beyond the obvious, and the people see on the commercial side. This is the issue that people jump to conclusions, and rightly so. I don't blame them because, yes, people might think great published in Spanish, great published in French, but you need publishing companies in France and Spain to buy the rights to publish them. Costs of printing and publishing is quite enormous. We only heard a story the other day about a bookshop that didn't sell one single book in an entire day, and then tweeted what's coming to the world, and everyone was interested and wanted. The media can help, it can project, it can influence, it can open debate, but people aren't buying books like they used to. It's not what it used to be. So we are trying to see if we can find publishers in France and Spain and get it translated. And we might, the publisher I spoke to them, they might even do that themselves. But would there be sufficient demand? And the answer is, in probability, no.
Yeah, I suppose, of course, I agree completely with you about the translation side of it. I wonder whether there would be an interest in, in the likes of kind of South America and Argentina. Obviously it was a kind of a very big story. So whether there would be an interest there for people to read the book about Emiliano, I think there would certainly be a little bit.
I've been in touch with them all. I've been in touch with the Argentine embassy over a period of 3 or 4 months. I've suggested they should have an event there and get it translated to go to Argentina. They've had their own issues, they tell me, the change of the presidency. There might have been a change of the ambassador there, who I know quite well. And I've had him to some of my events with Ozzy Ardiles. I made a film about Ozzy's life story, and the ambassador came to the premiere of it. But no, nothing at all. No, there's it is harder than you think to believe that there is a pot of gold in having a book in Argentina, in Spain, in France. As yet, no one interested.
Yeah. Libby also asks, why is it taking so long to get an English court, to get this case in an English court of law? Is it due to the club's dispute over the ownership of Emiliano?
No, it's because the only possible litigation is going to be Cardiff against Nantes, and that's heading for the French courts if it heads to any court at all.
Yeah, and obviously the police investigation can't really get going or completed until the aviation investigation is finished. Is
Indeed.
that correct? Yeah.
Correct.
Jimmy Lees on Twitter said, it's about the title again. He said, intriguing title. It's quite brutal. He says, is this trying to expose something about what happened? Which obviously you need to read the book, but when you read the book and you find the facts,
I think it's an apt title. I think, it's as far as I could go without attracting any more issues and more intimidation. Is the only word I could think of. Or take it further as far as I could go. I'd like to have taken it further. I just don't have the evidence to have used another word there.
Yeah. Gaz Cubbins asks, I'd be interested in hearing some of the theories that are doing the rounds in the football world or media that people like us don't get to hear, which don't make the papers. He says something just doesn't feel right about this whole thing.
Well, he's spot on. It doesn't feel right. And that's where I started a year ago. It didn't feel right. And a year on, I know it doesn't feel right.
Yeah. Peaches says she's thinking of buying the book, but she's just not sure because she doesn't want to support something which is sensationalizing things needlessly. Can you tell her three things that would tell her something new about the book? Sorry, it's broken English, so I was trying to...
Okay. Well, the three things I can tell you about the book is that when you go through it all and follow the plot, because I think there's a plot, in book terms, let me put it, not in anybody else's plot, but in book terms, there's a plot, like a crime thriller. And when you get to the end and you're weighing up all the circumstantial evidence and indeed the evidence, you then find more than three things you didn't know before, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. Gaz asks, why do you think a plane would change ownership 4 times in one day, which is obviously taken from the book?
I think it is, I'm not talking specifically about the plane owners, in case there's doubt whether they are, but I think there is an awful lot of people that have an awful lot to hide.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I can't, for the life of me, get my head around how difficult it is to identify the owners of the plane. And there seems to have been real difficulty tracing these people, which to me is, in this day and age, is shocking, to be honest. It's not the most shocking thing about the book or the whole situation, but it is shocking to me that these plane owners seemed so elusive.
Well, there could be legitimate, in inverted commas, reasons why they do that. Legitimate in terms of, tax evasion, tax avoidance, all sorts of things that in this world go on that people think are perfectly legitimate. But under the circumstances of what we've seen, whoever wanted to swiftly change ownership, it's because of laws and aviation regulations that might have been breached.
Indeed, yeah. There's various reasons. It's bizarre to me that it was real difficult to trace. John asks, is the law different regarding black boxes in a smaller plane, as he thought that all planes had to have them?
Well, I'm not an aviation authority, so question I probably can't answer. But if there is a black box in that plane, which one assumes there is, then it needed to have been salvaged.
Yes, indeed. And again, they chose not to. And last two questions. Can you discuss some of the things that didn't make the book?
That's a good one. Who came up with that one?
That was John, who was actually my friend.
Yeah, well,
But
you don't want friends like that coming up with something. No, I can't, because if I could discuss them, I'd have put them in the book.
Yeah, and I did say that to him, but I said I would ask it. Obviously, there was a reason
there is
in the book.
There's a lot of information. Yeah, for example, I do know the identity of the person who was pursued outside a coffee shop in North London.
Yeah, of course.
And I do know an awful lot of other bits of information which I'm privy to, but would have given my word not to have used. I'm trying to think of anything that was absolutely crucial. There's one piece of information that I have that is absolutely vital to the whole of this, but I couldn't put in the book and I can't divulge now. Whether I can later on, I'm asking the source to provide me with the information, but I think we'd have to be a little further down the line. And so at the moment, sorry to be evasive, but I can't tell you what it is now.
No, I do understand. Obviously, like, there's reasons why you wouldn't have put them in the book, in the first place. With that last thing you mentioned there, and you said that it's vital to everything. If and hopefully when you're able to release that information, or that information does become public knowledge, is it the sort of information which would maybe shock people, or would it change anything, or anything like that?
It would strengthen what I'm trying to get to the bottom of, and reaching conclusions in the book. It would strengthen it substantially.
Okay. And final question sent in was, what does Harry Harris believe happened to the Sala flight following all of his research? So they're basically asking for your personal opinion.
Well, my personal opinion is that the unanswered questions leave me with a feeling of a massive desire to get those questions answered, because without the answers, you can't really come to a definitive conclusion, other than my personal view is, and it's backed up by circumstantial and the evidence, is there was foul play. But to what degree of foul play and how many people it involved will unfold. I'm pretty sure will unfold in the near future, because I hope the book has created that atmosphere of people wanting to know more. My plea to people is not to keep on saying there's a profit to be made, there's ulterior motives to the book, don't buy the book. My plea is, buy the book and force people to investigate this further. Force people not to wash their hands of it, to cover it up, not to have a situation where in the last 3 months there hasn't been a flicker of interest in the media on Emiliano Sala.
Yeah, absolutely. And I couldn't agree more. I'll pop a link in the description for this episode to the book, so people can just go directly to it. It's available in paperback or hardback. It's available in digital copy on Kindle and other devices. Harry, thank you.
50,000 people. I'd like 50,000 people to buy this book, and then we could give a big check to the family and hope that will help them. My view is, no matter how much money you gave the family, they want answers, not money.
Yeah, absolutely. But it would still be nice if we could get, if you could sell enough copies of the book that you could go and, give the family something, because it does feel like remember Dalman said that the family have kind of been forgotten while the clubs are arguing over the money. And
yeah, there must be. You're a Cardiff City fan. There must be a supporters club, supporters fans groups.
Yes,
They should be starting a government petition, justice for Emiliano Sala. They should sign it in their thousands and get the government to open a full public inquiry, because there are a lot of questions to be answered.
Yeah, there is a hell of a lot of questions, and you're right, it has, it's no longer in the media, it's no longer being talked about as much, and hopefully this book can change that, because there's people who need to tell and say what they know. The family needs the answers. They're the ones I feel for the most. They're just left with this massive hole in their life where they've lost, their son, their partner, but then they've also, they haven't got a reason why, which makes it, 10 times worse. I've just before I finish, Harry, I've just found there's one more question which I missed. Would you mind just answering it quickly?
No, not at all.
So Steve asks, the ex-girlfriend of Emilio Sala mentioned the football mafia in a social media post. Did you look into that kind of aspect of it, of kind of like an underlying any issues of a third party or this kind of football mafia that she mentioned in the aftermath of it all?
By the time she posted that, I was in full agreement, but she obviously took it down.
Yes,
because someone must have said something. But then I heard that she reposted it. So I mean, it now sounds more pertinent than ever what she had to say, and it'd be fascinating to know why she said it. I would assume it was out of anger and hitting out, but did she know something?
Yeah, it'd be interesting, wouldn't it, to know whether it was like an emotional response where she was just angry, or if she did, there was something that she knew about something. And unfortunately, that's what we need, is answers. There's lots of questions, but there's the vital answers are still missing. Harry, thank you ever so much for your time. I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate your honesty in answering all the questions which from myself and people have sent in. Where can the people find you on Twitter?
At Footie, FOOTIE Legends 100.
Okay, and I'll put a link to that in the description also. And guys, you can find me at acecast_nation on Twitter. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/acepodcastnation. If you click the bell, you'll be notified every time we upload a new show. We upload 3 new shows a week. We've had various, footballers, fighters, actors. We got a couple of real good shows coming up with bands, and we got the weekly Andy Campbell Championship show, which drops every Wednesday, where myself and former Premier League striker Andy Campbell go through the latest championship action, as well as the biggest stories in the football world. And we've had a couple of UFC fighters on recently for some unscripted and uncensored fun as well. And you can also find the audio versions at all the usual places, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, things like that. Harry, is there anything else you'd like to say before we close up?
No. I think it's been a pleasure to answer all the people's questions. It'd be great, and if any more come in and you want to come back to me in a few days' time, please feel free. All I can tell you is I'm determined to make sure that there'll be a few more headlines out there in the next few days.
Excellent, and I'll do everything I can to help, and we'll be dropping the show very shortly. and myself and Andy are going to do another show to follow up as well. Thank you ever so much, Harry, and guys, download and watch the show. Tell your friends, give it a thumbs up, give it a comment, and share it. Let's get the answers for Emiliano Sala and his family that they deserve.